Okay, perfect. I hope it's loaded, that you guys can see my screen okay. Today, we are going to have a pretty short webinar on our in-app improvements and best practices within the in-app product. Wanted to quickly introduce myself and the agenda for today. My name is Sasha. I am a customer success manager here at OneSignal. Today, I'm going to first talk about some of the improvements that we've made to the product in the last couple of months. And then from there, we're actually going to hop into the platform quickly and talk about some best practices and give a little walkthrough of some kind of time-saving tips and some sort of additional features that aren't always used as much but can be super beneficial. And then we'll save a little bit of time at the end for you guys to ask questions. Great. So first, I want to talk about some of the improvements we've made. So one of the first improvements we've made is we've made engagement metrics front and center. So 3 things that we're surfacing right towards the top of the page, easy for you to see, are, so I'm going to outline them and then outline sort of what their definition is within OneSignal. So one is impressions, which is how many times that in-app message has been shown. This is also how we bill for the in-app messaging product, so you can really properly forecast and have an idea of what kind of engagement you're getting. The next is unique clicks. So that's how many times someone has interacted with that in-app. It's a unique user, a new user. And then total clicks. So that's going to be how many total times it has been interacted with. So I have a little overview underneath of where you can see impressions and the click-through rate with the breakdown of unique versus total that you'll see on the top of the page. The next piece that we've added to our in-app product is delivery and conversion graphs. So if some of you are familiar with sending push with us before, the delivery statistics graph will look somewhat familiar as we have a version of that for push as well. But what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to, out of your total number of impressions, get a breakdown of device type that they are being sent to, whether it's iOS or Android. You'll be able to see from your user base who's receiving the in-apps and of those impressions, who has what type of device. The next one is a really exciting one, and this is one that is, we haven't used anywhere else in our product before, but it is actually a conversion graph. So what that's going to do is it's going to not only just show that total unique clicks and total click number, but it's going to break down where they clicked. So there are, 3 sort of pieces when you're building, well, there are 4 pieces when you're building an in-app message, which is text, image, buttons, or the background. And of those 3 of them, you are able to click and link, which are images, buttons, and the background. So what we're able to do is show you a graph of, from the various images, buttons, backgrounds that you're using, where people are clicking or engaging. So a few good uses of this we'll get into a little bit later. But that's something new to surface, which, especially if you're having a 2-button comparison, you may be asking someone a question like yes, no, or something like that. Can be interesting to kind of see that breakdown of what's being engaged with. Great. I'm going to hop into the next slide. Another improvement, this is also to metrics, it's to engagement over time. So as you can see from the graph below, it's not just taking in a factor of what engagement looks like, but also putting it over a time frame. So the options that we have are a 1-hour time frame, if this is, an in-app maybe going to a really large group, or it's a very limited promotion, something like that, where you're expecting like high engagement or something that you would want to break down that granularly. We also have 24 hours or even a 30-day time frame for you to see how the engagement with that in-app ebbs and flows. You do have the option to filter that graph by device as well. And then also we are going to surface the engagement broken down from where that engagement occurred, similar to the conversion graph that we just looked at, showing engagement with the background, a button, an image, etc. So that will be layered into that graph. Great. Next one, and this is a really exciting one. This was a highly requested feature, is carousel engagement metrics. So before I go into this, I do want to take a quick step back in case some of you aren't familiar with our carousel product. I'll go into the platform so that you can see it in a second, but the carousel is essentially different full screen swipe through windows, which you've probably seen in it's very commonly used in onboarding or product feature introductions to kind of give you a swipe and display of different images to kind of maybe tell a more holistic story. So we have a carousel product out of the box, very easy to use, very intuitive. And now what we're able to do is really break down more granularly what that engagement looks like. So you can have up to 10 cards on a carousel. And what we're able to do now is gauge the engagement, the impressions, and the clicks broken down by the individual cards. So, if people aren't swiping through past the third slide, or there's really high engagement with the image on the second card, things like that we're able to surface. The other thing we're able to do, so you can see the all statistics image on the bottom right. So that'll kind of show you of each card, the breakdown of the pieces within it and what that engagement looks like. And we go ahead and we calculate the click-through rate for you. And then on the left, we actually have the ability to have engagement with cards over time. So you can see, similar to the graph that I showed you above with the in-app engagement over time, you have that breakdown for each card within Carousel. So for those of you who are using Carousel, especially for some of those like really early important use cases, like a welcome message, like a new product introduction or new feature introduction, you can really see exactly where the user is engaging and not. Great. And one thing I wanted to call out before we move fully into the best practices piece of this demo is this does unlock a use case that can be super beneficial and can sometimes be hard to set up or a little bit technically heavy. But in this case, you are able to set up real-time surveys. So you can quickly, ask users a question, use our buttons to rate that engagement. And as you can tell from some of the graphs above, you can clearly see the engagement in different, products. Like if, they would or wouldn't recommend your product, you're able to really see the graph of where your users are clicking. We do also have the ability to tag users based on their reactions. You can customize their experience or potentially look into further outreach. If someone gave you a low rating or potentially, some sort of maybe link to rate the app or some other kind of engagement, like high engagement value for someone who rated you really highly. Great. And the good news is, you can set up the buttons, you can set up the tagging, and you can look at all this great analytics in our reporting out of the box. You don't have to do any, technical lift there. Great. I am going to hop into the platform. Give me a quick second. And also, as I'm going through this, feel free to send questions throughout. That way, as soon as I'm wrapping up, we can have a little bit of time to hop into there. So the next thing I'm going to do is go into just some best practices, some features that aren't seen as much within in-app messaging. The first thing I wanted to call out is when you go, so you'll go to the messaging tab on the top bar, and then from within it, you'll have different messaging options. If you don't see in-app, reach out to us because it just might not be a part of your contract, and we can sort of talk to you about pricing, what that looks like. But the first thing you'll see is we actually have some out of the box templates that we give you. And it might sound like easy advice. But if you are looking to implement either some of these use cases or just looking for general ideas, I highly recommend taking some of the templates that we've preset and making them work for you. So, we have sort of selected and made it work, but you could easily swap out an image, swap out a color, and many pieces of it we've already set up. So that's just kind of one quick trick, and also to kind of get your, get your creative juices flowing on what you might want to do. So we have the 5 templates out of the box that you can really easily plug and play. Maybe our new feature isn't going to look like what you want your new feature to look like, but it is a good way. It is a good kind of starting point and can kind of help get started and utilize the different blocks and quickly show you what we're able to do. Great. One of the next things that I wanted to call out as a quick trip. So I'm going to give, this is an example of an in-app message for a food delivery that wants to get feedback on your meal. A couple of quick tricks while you are setting up your in-app message that can save you a little bit of time. So here we're going to walk through the pieces of this message. We have our text block on the top, our image below. As you can see, we've brought in our own GIF. And then we have a couple of buttons here. So one thing I wanted to emphasize is, as you can see, you know, we've picked our text, we've picked our color, our color for the background, our color for the text, everything has already been decided on. What you can do is you can actually hit clone block, and it's going to take all of the work that you've just done creating that button and duplicate it to the next. So rather than going in and filling in all those pieces individually, let's say you wanted, you know, 2 blue blocks, all you have to do is go in and change the text, you know, or if everything is aligned and you just want to change the color, it makes it a lot easier if you are duplicating work that you've already done. The next example I want to give of that is actually from within cards itself. So when you are in our full screen message type, we have 4 different types out of the box. When you're in the full screen message type, it unlocks the ability to add these different cards that are going to become the swipe for this carousel. But the thing I wanted to mention is, once you've created a card, when you hit add card from there, it's going to take the last card you made and duplicate that. So similar to what I had just been outlining for the buttons, a quick way to make sure if you've done a lot of work on one of your tabs and all you're doing is like switching out the text or switching out the image, making sure that you aren't, you know, starting from scratch. Make sure that you are copying the work that you're going to be replicating on other slides. Great. So wanted to quickly talk about the 4 message types. I think one of the most commonly used is the center, just because it allows you to have some image, some room for creativity. It's a little bit bigger than a top or a bottom message type. Top and bottom message types are kind of good for messages that you might not want to disturb the app experience quite as much, or you have, you know, a smaller announcement or something that can fit in, you know, a more condensed format. But our Carousel product is only available for our full message type as of now, but center is pretty popular. The next thing I wanted to call out in terms of things that maybe aren't used as much but are very helpful are when we get to triggers. So some people will just, you know, set an in-app message to trigger on app open. That is what we default to, but we do have a lot of additional capabilities. So one would be the ability to change the conditions so that the in-app message doesn't come up until someone has been in the app for a certain period of time. So this can be helpful, you know, especially if someone is going into your app with a purpose. They might not want to be interrupted as much. You might want to give them a little bit of time. Or even when it's a welcome message, you might not want to overwhelm someone the second they get to the main screen. You might want to delay it a few seconds so that they have a little bit of time to explore before they want to, you know, sort of read your overview and your, you know, value prop for the product. A couple other things that we're able to do. So we are also able to trigger off of last in-app from OneSignal. So if we send another in-app message and we want to make sure we stagger it so we're not, you know, overwhelming them and giving them time in between in-app messages, we can do that. And then one of my favorites is actually having an in-app trigger. So one of the things that we're able to do is we are able to you know, capture information on what they're doing in the app with our mobile SDK. And if something happens in the app that could be worth surfacing an in-app message from, we're actually able to trigger in-app from that action happening. So if you want a, thank you for purchasing in-app message to come up and confetti to come out as soon as someone finishes a purchase. All you have to do is, the key value pair purchase is completed, let's say. And as long as that event is being tagged by our SDK, we have access to it. We are able to actually trigger off of very specific behaviors within the app, which can be helpful because it means that you are really being very thoughtful about when you're messaging them and what they're doing in the app. And it's kind of a fun extra engagement for those people, especially if they're achieving certain milestones in your app that might be worth celebrating or that you need feedback on, things like that. Great. Another thing is we do have more advanced settings as to when you are sending a message. And I feel like sometimes because it's hidden in arrow, it's not seen as much. But one of the things that you're able to do is, so we default to showing a message once, but we do also have the ability to trigger anytime the terms of this in-app trigger are met. So, that way, if you're congratulating someone for a purchase, you can continue to do that when they continue to make a purchase. And also multiple times. So one of the things that you're able to do, oh, that's a big number. One of the things that you're able to do is have it set to go out, a certain number of times that you feel comfortable with, and then stagger the timing in between. So depending on how often users will go in your app based on your use case, you have a way of kind of customizing so they can see it more than once, but also making sure that you set the terms to make sure it's not coming up too often or too disruptive, depending on what the content is. Great. Okay, so that is an overview of some of the new pieces of the analytics, as well as some, quick tips and tricks when you're going in and setting up a message yourself. One thing I highly recommend is setting yourself up as a test device. That's the last thing I'll say before we go into questions. It's the best way to test it. So when you set yourself up as a test device, we have documentation. All you have to do is look up test device in our search bar and documentation. And what this allows you to do is when you're testing these in real time, you can send to your test device, select your device from the list. We'll send you a push notification that you can swipe open to see the in-app experience. And it's just the best way to kind of see what it looks like live, make sure that everything is rendering the way that you want it to. Great. Well, I am going to go into questions. Oh, this is a great question. Okay. We have a question. Can you have an in-app message deep link to an area within your app? Yes, you can. Actually, let me go ahead and re-share the screen. Yes. So let me, did you mean from an in-app message or did you mean from a push? So what we can do, let me show you. The answer is going to be yes. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So another trick here under add click actions, this is when you're determining what you want to happen when someone clicks on a certain, those clickable items that I'd mentioned before, the buttons, the images, the background, etc. You can actually pick where you go from there. So if you wanted this button to link to a certain area within your app, you can set up the URL so you are able to deep link to an area in your app. I just recommend testing it. And if you have any problems, I don't know if you can see my mouse right now, but here in the bottom right corner, you can reach out to our support team. So if for some reason this in-app linking isn't working, we can always help you troubleshoot it. But yes, you can send someone within your app. It's a great question. And same goes for push. Same rules apply. You can deep link to an area inside your app as well. Great. Any more questions? I'll give you guys a minute. Okay, it looks like we don't have any more questions, so I am going to wrap up here. But thank you guys for joining. You'll have access to this demo afterwards. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us feel free to reach out to us at support@onesignal.com. We're always happy to answer your questions. You can also go to our OneSignal documentation. We have some good in-app use cases and examples if you're looking to kind of brainstorm what you might want to do first. And thanks for joining today.